This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
These schemes are very sophisticated. Very smart people are falling victim to them. So I think we need to get away from the victim shaming.
Are you caring for others while working and trying to live your own life? Wondering how to find the time for your own health and happiness? Well, you're in the right place. The Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast, which is part of the Whole Care Network, is the show where real family caregivers share how to be happy and healthy while caring for others. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Elizabeth Miller. I'm a fellow family caregiver, a care advocate, a professional speaker, author, certified caregiving consultant, and certified senior advisor. If this is your first time listening, thank you for being here. This is a show produced bi-weekly to help family caregivers integrate self-care and caregiving into their lives. Each episode has an accompanying show notes page. If you'd like more detail about the topics, products, and resources we speak about, or you want to see any of the related photos, you'll find the show notes by going to the website happyhealthycaregiver.com, and underneath the podcast menu, click the image or episode number for today's show. The link for the show notes will also be in your podcast platform's episode description. Now let's get to it. Let's jump into this episode. Before we get into today's Caregiver Spotlight with Art Bowker, I want to first share a couple announcements with you. First of all, if you aren't on the Happy Healthy Caregiver email list, you are missing out. Every Tuesday, I share something happy, something healthy, something care-related, so that I can help fast-track you to support and resources. You can subscribe very easily by going to bit.ly/HHCE News. I'd like to thank our episode sponsor today, Rare Patient Voice. Did you know that you can earn cash in exchange for your opinion? Well, Rare Patient Voice, or RPV, helps connect researchers with patients and family caregivers for over 700 diseases and conditions. RPV provides you the opportunity to voice your opinion to improve medical products and services while earning cash rewards. If you're interested, join the RPV panel at rarepatientvoice.com/Happy Healthy Caregiver. I want to talk about what I recently read. I read The Winemaker's Wife by Kristen Harmel. This was a moving story set amid the champagne vineyards of northern France during the darkest days of World War II. The audio version of this book is very well done. I'm always drawn to World War II books in France, and this one was definitely more about the relationships between the characters than it was the war itself. Essentially, the story is about layers of secrets that fester and grow, and people searching for identity during a troublesome and life-threatening time. It's perhaps a little bit longer of a listen than I would have liked normally, but I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'll link to it in the show notes. My favorite thing that I want to recommend is something that I want you to check out actually on Netflix. The show is a series and it's called The Man on the Inside. It's on Netflix and it stars Ted Danson. So if you were a previous fan of Cheers or 3 Men and a Baby and some of his other blockbuster films, I think that you're really going to like this one. His character's name is Charles, and he's a retired professor and also a widower who gets a new lease on life when a private investigator hires him to go undercover inside a San Francisco retirement home. It's a funny show because Charles first has to learn how to essentially be a savvy spy. This wasn't something that he was done his whole life. And he has to also navigate all the interesting characters and the drama that happens inside a retirement community. I know this would have been a series that my parents would have loved to. I'm going to link to the trailer trailer in the show notes so you can check it out. And also, I just saw the good news that this series got renewed for a second season. So definitely wasn't the only one who this show appealed to. Let's meet our caregiver in the spotlight. Art Bowker cares for his mother who is living with Alzheimer's while juggling multiple careers, including one as a cybercrime expert. Art has over 30 years of experience in law enforcement and corrections and co-authored a book to help us protect vulnerable adults from cybercrimes and provides guidance on surviving a cyber attack. In this episode, we chat about cybercrime and I learn about, the common schemes like pig butchering. And also I learned what we can do as family caregivers to help prevent a financial catastrophe in our family. We talk about Art's experience with his parents hoarding. We talk about legal guardianship and why that came about and what he learned through that process. And we also talk about Art's passion for cigars and bourbon. I hope that you enjoy the show. Welcome, Art, to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
I appreciate you having me on this program. I'm
Yes.
excited about it.
I'm excited for folks I think this is going to be really educational for a lot of family caregivers. And so we're going to get into all of that. But first, we start something off with some words of inspiration from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. These are just things I have collected over the years that have helped speak to me to kind of put me in a good frame of mind. And then I made one for my sister when we passed care from my mom, from me to her. So this one says, the past cannot be changed, forgotten, edited, or erased. It can only be accepted. Does that speak to you at all?
I can see that in dealing with both my parents, things that occurred, the happy memories of when I was a kid to not seeing those same Christmases, same dinners and things that were going on, and not realizing when my mother was starting to decline that some of the things she was doing, my regret is not realizing what was going on. And I think both my sister and I felt that.
I mean, we can be really hard on ourselves as caregivers, like, the shoulda, woulda, couldas start to kind of creep up on us, but we're human, right? And we make the best decisions with the information we have at the time, but it can be hard. It's easier said than done sometimes to accept what is.
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit, Art, about your caregiving story.
Well, it really started probably, I want to say 2016, where I ended up moving in with my parents for a short period of time. I was in a transition myself, and I started to realize that my parents were, actually my father probably more, but both of them were hoarding things, buying, like preparing for a nuclear winter, canned goods.
Goodness.
And then just my dad was fond of going to like Tractor Supply and buying tools. And he could have outfit several garages with the stuff he bought. I remember finding a bag with like 7 pry bars in it. Who needs 7 pry bars? I started to realize.
I'm not even sure I need one, Art. I don't.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think I've got 1, but 7, all the exact kind. And he was a proud individual. He had been a federal examiner. He knew what he wanted. Nobody could tell him anything. And he was not accepting. My mom was declining far more than he was.
Okay.
And he was not.
Your mom did she have a cognitive?
Yes. Yeah. She had Alzheimer's, and she was doing the things that he didn't understand what was going on. He thought he was taking it personal. Like she was acting like, well, an example, she told him one time, "You better get out of here before my husband gets home," or
it's funny, but it's not funny. Yeah.
Yeah. If my father finds you here, you're in big trouble. And he took it to mean she didn't love him anymore. He didn't understand
the disease.
Yeah. And he said, he felt she was going crazy, not understanding it was a decline. And
It's so
He,
hard. I mean, it goes back to the accepting quote that we kicked things off with. Like, it's not really his fault either. I just don't think they do a great job. Maybe they're doing a better job now of really educating caregivers. So much of us, we have to kind of go out on our own and get this education ourselves to really understand that, correcting them and being angry with them and all that, it's their disease.
yeah, I remember him saying, if you don't stop it, they're going to, commit you. You lose your marbles and that. And he didn't understand. And
Yeah.
my sister and I tried to like bring in somebody to assist him in the house, and he did not want a stranger in the house. He made it unbearable for him. And I remember it's probably a year before COVID where it was clear his condition, his physical condition was deteriorating. He couldn't handle it anymore. And I finally said, she's got to go in assisted living. And it was looking back, it was on Mother's Day. And I took her there with him. And then for the next year, he was at the assisted living every day. And he was driving at night. He wasn't supposed to be driving at night. They were willing to take him in because he was eating a lot of junk food and like his diet but he resisted it. And I hate to say this, but COVID was kind of a blessing because they were going on lockdown. And I said, Dad, if you don't move in with her, you're not going to be able to go. And that's how we got him into the assisted living. And it was a good thing.
I'm glad it was a blessing for somebody. But to your point, like, yeah, he wanted to see her. And, I did a show during that time where someone became a dishwasher so that they could see their husband that was living in the community during that time, Mary Daniels. So we'll link to that episode. And then going back to like the hoarding art, it just came out of the blue. Like your dad wasn't a hoarder your whole life, or
he would buy things, but they were usually like he needed them. That was like maybe he was on a project and he needed some
okay.
tool. It was not buying multiple of the same thing.
Yeah.
My sister and I, when we went in the basement, it was like, when did this happen? Both my sister and I didn't live near my parents. I lived about an hour and a half, and my sister lived 3 hours. So, we'd visit on holidays and stuff, but it was amazing the amount of stuff they bought. When we finally got the house cleaned out and be able to put it up for sale, as we were doing that, we found these storage lockers, 9 huge storage lockers.
9.
Yeah. And they were filled with beer mugs that Dad had signed up for a beer month of the club thing. And it was like, why? And they were stored in the basement. They were on display and just, it was that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Filling some kind of a void in his life.
Yeah. And it was, I would go, Subway'd have that deal, buy like 2 foot longs, get one free. Well, I mean, I could barely eat 1 foot long, and he'd always want to order the extra foot long to get a free one. And I was like, who's going to eat it?
Yeah.
Or I remember they loved to go shopping, and it was like buy 2, get 1 free. And it's like, he's like, you're losing money if you don't buy that extra shirt because you're getting 1 free. And I'm like,
yeah,
but you don't need,
the deal. He was enticed by that.
Yeah.
Wow. And how was that going through their, after your folks, I guess it kind of self-corrected itself too. When he moved in with your mom, he wasn't doing as much shopping, or did they just start getting packages all the time?
Well, he kind of ended up moving in right away. It was kind of like, you need to go, they're going to lock down the facility tomorrow. He went and got a bunch of, some quick stuff, but he didn't have credit cards with him. Actually, I'd started taking over the finances at that point to make sure bills got paid. And so he didn't have a credit card, and he didn't need any money. They would provide food, and my sister and I would send in care packages, from Amazon. So the shopping went away. He wasn't.
Okay, that's good.
And the community, they had previously lived by themselves, and there were a couple friends they'd go out with every once in a while, but they had gotten older too. So they were kind of isolated. And with them in the assisted living, they had activities there. They were always doing something. Facility they were in, my sister and I couldn't ask for better care.
Nice. Do we want to shout it out?
It used to be called Ally Senior Care, and now I believe it's R&S Senior Care. My mother's currently there.
RM Senior Care.
Yeah, in Lisbon.
Okay, we'll shout them out because you know what? When you find a good one, you want to know about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that they always wanted to keep them together. And at one point, my mom, she was having a series of minor strokes, mini strokes, and she ended up going into the hospital, and they said she's got to go to a nursing home.
Mm.
And that broke my dad. My dad was like, she can't go to a nursing home. In fact, they actually arranged a visit between the two of them.
Mm.
And he was upset. He was like, we're getting an attorney. We're going to sue. And I thought that happened in like January. And I thought, I didn't think my mom was going to last. But she kept losing weight. But then she started gaining weight. And it was about a year, they said, the assisted living said, we'll take her back. She's
Okay,
good
good.
enough for us. So she ended up moving back in with him. It was like, I remember seeing him and her. They hadn't seen each other for 9 months because this was like also during COVID and both of them were on lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to reunite. And then when my probably maybe a year later, my dad declined, and they went out of their way to continue allowing him to stay there. They did not have they were a step down from a nursing home, and I think they weren't allowed to administer medication, or there was something. And they were able to keep him there. He actually passed away there, and my mom and him were like in two rooms right next door to one another.
Mm. Well, I mean, and what, nice that they bent over backwards to kind of keep them together, which is what your parents both wanted. I know at some point you mentioned like you took over the finances for your parents, and that you are an expert really in the cyber safety space. But talk first, I think you became a legal guardian for your parents. Talk us through that. Like, what were the signs that made you think that this was needed? How did you go through this process? Who does this make sense for?
Well, my sister and I actually started with the power of attorney.
Okay.
We had him sign a power of attorney, and she signed it, but I'm not sure she fully understood, but she signed it. And I took the power of attorneys with my parents to their bank, and the bank refused to acknowledge. They didn't like my dad's signature. And my dad he had always signed a distinctive way for documents. They didn't like that. Then they questioned whether my mom had the capability to sign the power of attorney. And
it was no good, really.
Yeah. So they had all their funds going into that bank account, and I could access that bank account through a computer, but we ended up opening another bank account, which put my sister and I were on that account, and we would continue to pay bills. As my mother got worse and worse, we needed to pay more to the assisted living to keep up her care.
Yeah.
I think they needed to have 2 people to handle her. The care increased, so the cost increased. And they had enough money in the bank account, but it was rapidly declining. And we realized we're going to have to sell the house. And that's when we went and got guardianship.
Okay.
And I had to have I'd have them both evaluated by a psychologist, and they said they were both had diminished capacity. And that was an experience. I didn't realize I had to separate the 2 accounts. I'd always had all their money going into one account, and I could pay my mom's expenses. My dad was a retired federal employee. His pension was a lot more than my mother, so if her pension wasn't enough to pay, it was all in one account. Well, the guardianship, each one of them had a separate account, and only her income went into one account, and only his income went into the other. So he could have more in his account than my mom, but I couldn't commingle them. So that was an experience. And just getting to all the little things, like Dad had bought little individual stocks instead of having like a brokerage account, like through Fidelity or something. He'd have like 5 shares in Bob Evans, 5 shares in Wendy's, and had all these little, not even getting, $1 worth of dividends. And of course, he wasn't having the dividends rolled back into the stock. He was having checks mailed. So just trying to keep up with all that. And then also I found that he was paying for some antivirus software that was coming out of his check, out of his account. What is this, Dad? He had no idea what it was. He had signed up for it, and they just kept taking the money out, and I had to cancel. I said, this isn't authorized. So, and while I'm going through all the dealing with them, my co-author and I were working on our book, about keeping families
This is
safe.
what you did professionally, right?
Actually, it was a kind of a side thing. I've been in cybercrime, but my full-time job was at that time as an investigator, investigated civilian complaints against Cleveland police officers after retiring
Okay.
from federal law enforcement. I had a background in computers, and my co-author and I had written a book before about investigating internet crimes, and we were like, we need to have a book that helps the individual. And we had started off with, chapters of how do you protect your kids? How do you protect your home? And I'm like, we need to have a chapter on protecting your elderly parents.
Yes.
And he agreed. He also had experience dealing with dementia, his parents with dementia and stuff. And we started digging in, and we saw the schemes that elderly that fall victim to. They're in a unique victim category in many ways. And we said, we're doing a whole chapter just on vulnerable adults. And that's what we did.
How do you, and we're going to link to the book, Art, so that people can take advantage and get that. And how do you stay abreast of all the different schemes that are going on?
Well, we keep track of like the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI has warnings, and then there's a couple websites that we talk about in our book that keep up with the trends. One of the big things that is being talked about is pig butchering schemes.
Pig butchering.
Right.
Okay.
And
I'm imagining we don't get any pork out of this, a freezer full of pork. No.
And basically what it is they connect up with vulnerable individuals, maybe a widower or, somebody that's divorced, and it may be through a text message, could be an email, a friend request, and they start off and develop this relationship. The pig butchering comes in as what they're doing is they're fattening the person up with love, care, understanding, and then when they're to a certain point, they convince them to invest in schemes, basically old Ponzi schemes, like you'll get this humongous return and you and I will be able to be together in a lifestyle. And then that's the butchering part. Fatten them up with love.
Then they're gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And the insidious thing is you're thinking it's bad, but it gets even worse because these schemes are being run on an industrial level by criminal organizations in other countries, like in Cambodia, in that area. And they are actually setting up compounds with call centers that hand over the different functions. Like somebody starts off with the love, and then somebody is brought in to work on the scheme to produce the false business statements and stuff. And they liquidate the person's assets. And by the time they find out, it's gone. The money's gone. That's the thing that
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And to think that kind of evil, that industrial level evil is going on where countries are letting these groups create these basically criminal organizations with buildings and infrastructure and
businesses,
yeah.
whole businesses with what if they did good? Why are they going to come after? I mean, I've heard lots of stories in my role with people who have been scammed, sadly. And I've known people personally, my uncle was basically like a genius. And, if you would have told me he would have gotten scammed, I would have never believed it. But the IRS gift card scam for my uncle, my brother lives with an intellectual disability and is on the autism spectrum. And we have to constantly monitor his Facebook messages because he's a lonely guy. He's, these women look beautiful. These women look beautiful that are inviting him. Now we have prevented he doesn't have access to the things that could get him in a lot of trouble. He gets a cash allowance and, he's been instructed not to give his personal information, but we have to still kind of monitor that. Is there anything, by the way, that we can do besides monitoring his Facebook messages to better safeguard him?
Well, that you could install monitoring software to make sure he doesn't set up other accounts. There is computer monitoring that we talk about the advantages of doing that. And then there's also some legal concerns about whether you can do that under certain circumstances.
What are some of the names of those software?
The one that I used to use was because I know this because I used to supervise cyber offenders, and we
Okay.
would install software on theirs. The one that I used to use was SpectreSoft, but I don't believe they're in that market. They're doing like employer type things.
Yeah.
Just what I would recommend is, because there's monitoring software that's specific to computers, and then there's monitoring software that can be used on cell phones. So that's one way. One of the things that we stress is just open communication back and forth with the person. Who are you talking to?
Yeah.
Engage them, keep in contact. What's going on with your life? And if they start saying things like, I think I'd like to travel overseas. Well, why would you like to travel overseas all of a sudden? What's that about? Well, I met this woman and she said we could be together. And then that raises the red flags.
Yes.
The technology allows you to do, the monitoring, but that's, you got to check it all the time. Where the actual engaging and finding out, getting involved in their life, they may start saying, I want to invest in Bitcoin currency. A 75, 80-year-old person, well, heck, somebody my age in their 60s. Why do you want to all of a sudden invest in that risky venture? And who's got you thinking about that? So the communication is key. Knowing what's going on, what they're checking their bank accounts. There's this, it comes to a point like with my parents where you got to step in and just take it over. You can't just let them continue because they'll circumvent it. One of the things that I've done is I've gone out and spoke publicly about my book, and I'm amazed at the number of people that come up and say, yeah, I was victimized. Somebody told me my computer was infected and I paid to get it uninfected and I ended up getting ripped off. Or, my friend had a girlfriend online and he invested, and I was just amazed at the number of people,
They have a story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's the toll scam now, right? Where they send you any link in a text, but it could even be like, I have a WordPress site. I get, hey, you've got malware on your website all the time. It's just the lengths that they'll go to with the phone calls and the texts and everything. It's like you really, then I log into my WordPress and I just kind of check things out myself without clicking on links and stuff. But it's sick. It's really sick. And then I think there's a lot of underreporting in this, right? Because people are embarrassed about it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But my dad, he was getting emails from the FBI that there was a warrant out for him. And I go, he should know better. But I would say, Dad, the FBI doesn't send you an email or a text. They don't call. They just come get you.
Yeah.
And he would get your computer's infected. And because I had computer expertise, he'd farm them over to me. And I'm like, Dad, this is a scam. And one of the things I had to caution my dad with, he constantly would go into the spam folder and look at those and go, why is the FBI I'm like, Dad, there's a reason it's been marked spam. It's not good. And he couldn't understand why the FBI would allow anybody to impersonate him. And if my dad had fallen to one of those schemes, he would have been devastated. He would have. There's an embarrassment. It's a sign like, how could I be so foolish? Now they're going, my kids or loved ones are going to take away my freedom. I'm so stupid. Those kinds of things. These schemes are very sophisticated. Very smart people are falling victim to them. So I think we need to get away from the victim shaming. There are schemes out there now that are using artificial intelligence.
Our voices, right?
Yep. A few months ago, there was an article in South America where the grandparent scheme, they were getting voices off of social media of family members' kids, and they were using AI to imitate those voices and call up and saying, I've been in a car accident, need you send me money. So the use of artificial intelligence, and these people know all the tricks to psychologically trick somebody. You need to act right away. That's a sales technique. That's a psychological. You need to act right away, or bad things are going to happen, or you're going to miss out on this opportunity. And that time thing, they weave that into this. You need to hit now or you're going to lose money, and that gets people motivated and they end up throwing caution to the wind.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'm thinking like the do not call list, like that might be something that we can do to kind of protect our loved ones. But I can't tell you how many texts I get. There's not a do not text list, is there? Can I get on that?
Basically, what they're doing is they're purchasing these lists, and if they're going to run a scam, they don't care about a do not call list.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if they can track it back. They use computers to make random calls to all these numbers and hoping they pick somebody will answer. The best thing to do is just ignore them. Don't respond. I get them on my cell phone all the time. Hi. And I'm like, okay.
Yes.
And sometimes if I'm bored, I play along like, okay, what do you want? And then and I'm like,
because
really?
you're in the field of doing that, which makes sense to see how far they'll go, what they'll say. You're educating yourselves. Is it best to block them or just to delete them?
I would block them and delete them.
Okay.
You don't want to respond back because that tells them it's a real number.
Yeah.
But I don't think they care. It doesn't cost anything to just keep calling random numbers.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's programmed. I love your tip about the communication. I think that's something I learned things through my brother just by talking to him. And sometimes we can prevent these things, but sometimes too, he thinks that we're just like, I don't know if he thinks we're trying to prevent him from having love and relationships. He's like, no, this is a person. Like, this is what she looks like. I'm like, that is not a real person. With someone who's neurodivergent or has a cognitive thing to explain that, it's unbelievable.
Well, on that same token, I think it's important also to tell them about real life examples of other people falling for those schemes. And we include some of those examples like, hey, this happened to this person. You're not alone. Tells them, other people fall into this, and it shows that these people will lie and manipulate to steal. You're not making it up.
Yeah, no, it's sick. It's sick. And I'm going to put if you fall victim to a scam, reporting it immediately. FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3, will link to that in the show notes. Anything else? Your book, obviously, we're going to link to that. Anything else that we can do to, I don't want to overwhelm the caregivers, but I want us to be smart.
Well, prevention is the best key. But we talk also about, and that's part of our book, is surviving. Okay, so you've been attacked. What do you do to overcome that? And we talk about reporting it, and then the process of how you collect as much information to give to law enforcement. They may not be able to catch the person right away, but the Internet Crime Center will take those reports and it will generate, like, oh, this is part of an organization. This is similar to this person in this area. And they may be able to eventually recover the losses. But the thing is, prevention, obviously, and then, reporting it and recovering afterwards and taking steps to make sure whatever happened before doesn't happen again. And then tell other people, like, hey, this is a scheme that's going on,
Don't be ashamed of it, but help educate, learn from it, help other people. What are your opinions on like identity theft insurance? Is that helpful?
We talk about having insurance, particularly like if you're running a business, a loss of data that could subject you to your customers coming after you for breaching data. I think insurance can be a good way. We talk also about how to get a credit freeze, freezing your credit, how to unfreeze it. Those are alternatives too, so that we did that with my parents. We froze their credit so that we didn't have to worry about somebody opening up lines of credit in their name.
Is that like just a website you can go to do that?
Yeah, we list those in the book. They're the three credit bureau agencies.
Okay, Equifax and all of them.
Yeah, and we talk about the differences between a credit freeze and complete block. We talk about you can put an alert on your account, and that stuff's free. That doesn't cost you anything. Ironic, we have credit freezes, and I've gotten notices that my parents' IDs have come up in a breach somewhere. I think AT&T was one of mine. Well, I got one from AT&T. So it's a way to stop anybody from opening up lines of credit.
Yeah. Good preventative stuff there, and good things that we can learn. Again, I'll link to the book, but it's called Surviving a Cyber Attack, Securing Social Media and Protecting Your Home Network. And it's co-authored with Todd Shipley. So we'll We'll link to that. Let's switch gears, Art, and talk about your self-care. I imagine you were working while caring for your folks and arranging all this and being their financial caregiver. What did that look like for you? Like how were you able to not, completely go through burnout and be an unhealthy caregiver?
Wow. I kind of took it in stride, kind of like humor. I remember one distinct occasion where at this time my mom was in a nursing home and my dad was by himself in the assisted living. And he was like 85 and we're talking, well, you're from Pennsylvania, Ohio in the wintertime in February.
Okay. Not my favorite time.
Yeah, cold. And he had actually he had bruised ribs from a fall. He'd come back and he was in the assisted living. And I get a call from the assisted living at say 1:30 in the morning. And they go, your dad wants to talk to you. We want to talk to you afterwards. And I'm like, okay. And my dad proceeds to say that he had been kidnapped. And I'm like, okay, Dad, well, you're okay now. You're back at the assisted living. Well, then I talked to the caregiver and I go, what is he talking about? Apparently, my dad had climbed out one of their crank out windows, had climbed out of the crank out window and had escaped to downtown. And they did not know. They had alarms on all the doors. I don't know how he climbed out a crank out window. I couldn't climb out a crank out window. He managed to do that, and they got a call from the police. Hey, are you missing one of your residents? And they go, no, they're all here, the doors. They went back and checked. He had pushed the bed up against the door and had climbed out and was trying to flag down cars at 1:30. And I'm kind of like, well, that's a lot of gusto at that age.
Yeah, he was committed
to getting out of there. And I kind of like chuckled and I'm like, I was the kid that I didn't escape from my house as a teenager and all that stuff. And here I am going through with my father escaping and doing stuff that was kind of like I'm living his teenage years. So I saw the humor of it and I'm like, well, I hope when I get to that age, I am rambunctious enough to, push against the odds and escape. And
yeah.
But I tried to see the humor. I mean, they would give him near beer, not non-alcoholic beer. He thought it was the greatest. He, was sitting out on the patio drinking a beer. And I'm like, he was having a good time.
He was a rebel.
Yeah.
So he ended up, your mom had Alzheimer's, but did your dad had cognitive decline or at least some adventures? Yeah.
His was more like short-term memory loss. Like,
okay.
If you tell him something, you could carry on a conversation with him and then he would forget what you talked about. Mm-hmm. Mom she was reverting back to when she was a child, and she's non-communicative. She doesn't talk now. Where he never was like that. She'd be able to carry on a conversation. Now the next week, if you tried to bring up, hey, we talked about this, he might not remember it.
Yeah.
And then the experience of, I didn't realize that urinary tract infections cause significant, I don't want to say mental,
hallucinations,
exactly.
dementia-related experiences. Yes.
Yeah, and I was able, they would call me up and say, your dad's talking about flying a plane. I go, my dad never flew a plane. You need to check him for a UTI.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like it's not painful for them to go to the bathroom. There's no other signs. My mom she accused my dad of cheating on her during a UTI and saying horrible things that. Yeah, so that's always a good advice for a caregiver is to look at that and check into that. Well, what does self-care look like for you now, Art? Do you have hobbies and interests?
Well, I am still working on this book, trying to, educate people about that. I also do work part-time for the Guardians, former Cleveland Indians, right? And we're teeing off for the summer season, so I'll be out
fun.
For that. I also
What do you do for the Guardians?
I work in security in their employee lot, which means I get to sit outside in the sun and enjoy the sun, the hot weather, which is great.
And people watching, a lot of people watching.
Yeah. I've done that for, this is going to be my 8th year of doing that.
Do you get to see any of the game?
Where I'm at now, I don't, but they give us like bobbleheads or whatever the giveaways are. We get those. And I do it on the weekend. It's not hard. and I have a fondness for smoking cigars, and I can sit out in the parking lot and smoke cigars and work, and it's great. I enjoy it.
Nice.
I'm also a member of the Elks, and I'm down there regularly. Enjoy the communication, the social events with them. And I also have 7 grandchildren who keep me occupied, all
Yeah, they
to
do.
my daughter. So
1 daughter, 7 kids.
yep, 7 grandkids.
What do your grandkids call you?
Big G.
Big G.
Yeah,
Where
because
does the G? Big granddaddy,
big grandpa. I'm the
big.
largest grandfather of all of them. Because some of them knew my grandfather, so that was their great grandfather. You know, my son-in-law's father. So I said, just call me Big G, and they usually just call me G.
Nice. I think I saw on your Instagram too, you're a bourbon lover.
Yes, I do drink.
What's your favorite bourbon? My husband works in the beverage industry.
I have a fondness for Long Branch.
Long Branch.
Right. I'm also a Woodford Reserve.
Yep, I know that one.
The nice thing is where my grandkids live is in Kentucky, which is right near Bourbon Trail. So I go down there, and the Elks, we have bourbon tastings. We have
Nice.
So I get to enjoy a bourbon every once in a while down there, about maybe once a week or so.
Well, it sounds like you're very plugged into your community. You've got a lot of social outlets, fun family outings and things like that, which is important to not feel isolated as a family caregiver. And we'll link to your Instagram profile. It's computer PO. Like, is it like, was the PO stand for?
When I was a probation officer, I was in charge of cyber offenders, so computer probation officer.
Got
I also
it.
have one that's connected strictly with the book that is not as active as many posts.
Art Cyber Safety Guy. Yeah, we'll link to that one as well. So very cool, very cool. And of course, we'll link to other spots.
I also share the stories with my sister. My sister, having the support of a sibling when you're dealing with parents that are having trouble is great. And just being able to talk. And I've learned that I think the social isolation, isolating yourself from others as you get older, is not the way to go.
Mm-mm.
From what I've read, keeping active, keeping involved.
Having structure. I mean, we all kind of crave that too. We're in this process for my brother, like one of the ways of keeping him out of trouble online is to keep him pretty busy. And so we're looking at, we've got him in some workday programs now where he's finding purpose and socializing with other people and helping other people, which is amazing. So it's been interesting to see him thrive because he's been isolated from other people living with disabilities much of his life. So yeah, we're just kind of in a test and learn stage and trying different things. Well, any other parting words for family caregivers, something you wish we talked about that we didn't, and then what is the best way that you would recommend people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through my email account, art, the cybersafetyguy.blog.
Okay. As long as they don't send any spam.
Yeah, no spam. Although my spam filter, it'll take care of that. You just get active in your vulnerable adult's life. Do it sooner than later. I think that was one of the regrets. My sister and I, we didn't realize how far it had gone. It's a lot more difficult having to clean out a hoarder's house than nipping in the bud early on. But stay involved, open lines of communication. Understand that they may say things or do things that seem like they don't care or they're angry, and it's the illness. It's one of the symptoms, and you have to understand that and take that into account.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Art, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your wealth of knowledge in the cyber safety space. Well, hopefully we're going to get people kind of plugged in, connected through your book and talking to their loved ones so that we can get in front of it and hopefully prevent some of these catastrophes from happening. It's just a really scary world out there, unfortunately. And people are coming after our vulnerable adults and people living with disabilities. And it's horrible. It's horrible. So thank you so much for what you do in this space. And thank you for coming on today to share.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this topic.
You're welcome.
Hello, podcast listener. If you're caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia, you don't want to miss All's Authors podcast, Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia. I'm your host, Mary Ann Shuko, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter. In each episode, I interview one of our 300 plus authors about their personal dementia story and why they chose to write about it, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help you on your own journey. We share a variety of stories across all diagnoses and from a range of caregiving experiences. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform and the Whole Care Network. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Find us at allsauthors.com. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast on the Whole Care Network. I hope this episode provided encouragement and practical tips to infuse into your life. You'll find the show notes and all the resources mentioned at happyhealthycaregiver.com. I also invite you to check out previous episodes of the podcast that you may have missed. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Ratings and reviews also help others discover the podcast, and sharing with a fellow caregiver is a great way to spread support. Stay connected with me between the episodes by following Happy Healthy Caregiver on your favorite social media platforms, and subscribe to the weekly newsletter where every week I share something happy, healthy, and care related. Just visit happyhealthycaregiver.com to join. Until our next episode, I'm Elizabeth Miller with a reminder to take care of you. Are you still here? Well, it's time for the disclaimer. I am not a medical, legal, or financial professional, and I am not providing medical, financial, or legal advice. If you have questions related to these topics, please seek a qualified professional. I have taken care to spotlight family caregivers and experts, but their opinions are theirs alone. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the written permission of Happy Healthy Caregiver, LLC. Thanks again for listening to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast on the Whole Care Network.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.